Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you to everyone who has joined. For those of you who are new to the SDEC, my name is Adam Greco, and I work for Search Discovery. And I'm going to just kind of kick us off with a couple intro slides and then hand it off to Jim to talk about Tableau design tips. So, Jim, you want to move us forward here? So those of you who are new to SDEC, we are a free education community focused on digital analytics. We have 12 topics that we cover, and if when you originally signed up to join the SDEC, if you maybe just picked one or two and decided you'd like to get more topics in your profile, just feel free to either email me at sdec@searchdiscovery.com, or you can DM me in the Slack group once you join the Slack group. So far, we just broke our 2,500 members, which is cool. In the business intelligence area, which this topic is related to, we just cracked 1,600 people. So really cool to see how this has taken off, and we're excited to have all of you here. We are in 74 countries, and we just hit 735 cities across the globe. So really cool to see everyone join. If you have other friends or coworkers that you'd like to get this free content, we have tons of room for more. So there's a link here that's bit.ly/SDI-SDEC. The more members we get, the more power that I have to go bug luminaries in the digital analytics industry to come present. It means a lot different when I say we've got 1,000 people versus 3,000 people. So if you can get as many people to join, and we did have a little contest that we're running to see who kind of gets the most people to join the SDEC. So if you tell them to put in your name as the referral, you might get some fun prizes. So please use that URL, and I will put that in the chat as well. Just a couple upcoming sessions. We now have 20 future SDEC sessions planned between now and February. So I've listed out the next couple of ones. These can all be seen in the calendar, and all of you who have signed up for the appropriate channels should get calendar invites. One I did want to mention is we do have another business intelligence one coming up October 13th, where Sean McLean is going to talk about Domo. So for those of you who like BI but use Domo versus Tableau, or if you just want to learn about other tools, you can join that. And then the last thing I want to mention is just during this session, if you have questions, please post them to the Q&A area, not into the chat area, just post them in the Q&A, and Jim will get to those at the end. Unfortunately, I actually have to exit after this intro because I have to go do another presentation. So I'm going to leave Jim on his own to answer all of the questions. But the webinar will be recorded and will be posted in the BI channel in Slack. And then one other last little note I just want to mention, there is another web analytics or digital analytics conference that is coming up soon that I'm going to put a link in the chat to. That's the Digital Analytics Association. In October is having their big annual One conference. And it's a really cool conference. At Search Discovery, we're big supporters of the Digital Analytics Association. And you don't have to be a member to join the conference, but Search Discovery has actually a discount code for anyone who wants to join that. So I'm going to put that in the Slack, in both the Slack group and in the chat here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim and depart. But thank you so much for joining. And Jim, it is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Well, good morning, everyone. As Adam said, my name is Jim Koenig. I'm a Director of Business Intelligence here at Search Discovery. I not only work in the Business Intelligence group, but I lead many of our partnerships that deal with business intelligence, including Tableau, Einstein Analytics, Domo, and Datarama. And not only just from a leading project standpoint and helping to grow our group, but I also still support many of these projects myself. So not only just a kind of a director of this group, but also a practitioner as well. And I think what this does is allows me to get into a lot of projects, understand them, and help provide expertise as we grow out our team. So our topic is going to cover more of the visual side of things. So in BI, there's everything from connecting data to building out data sets and dashboards. Today, we're going to talk more about the polishing of these dashboards and how to really make them useful for your audience. It's really the last step of the process in BI is providing those reports and that insight. So it should be one of the most important ones. But before we dive into that, really what we want to talk about is why is visual design so important? It's important because we use analytics to make business decisions. And if a dashboard is misinterpreted, bad business decisions can be a result. So a good dashboard should really follow four main principles. It should effectively communicate information in a clear and concise manner. It should provide transparent business context to understand how the metric or dimension is performing in context of the business. It should enable users to take action, whether it's directly in the platform or by knowing exactly what to do next. And last, it should encourage user engagement. People should want to use this dashboard. It should feel like something where I want to use it to gain information. I don't want to just have it as something that, or I just read a report from or a table. You want to have something that is fun to use and engaging to use and can build that UX piece. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about. So for today, I wanted to come up with something a little interesting of how we'd run this webinar. I could have just taken a bunch of screenshots from different examples, but I want to take you through 5 tips, and I want to do it through the context of a data set that we can all use and understand. And the data set that I came up with for today is around wine. So I know it's a little early to be talking wine at 11:30 Eastern here, but I think wine is a really interesting data set. There's many varieties, many different wineries, locations. There's over hundreds of thousands of different wines that have been produced. It's a really rich data set, and understanding kind of price point and average points is really interesting. So I downloaded about 100,000 rows of data from a wine database looking at US wine statistics. And I created a very simple Tableau dashboard, looking at average points by state, price by state, total number of wines by state, overall points, what is the top wines by variety, in total number, et cetera, et cetera. So I basically took that data set and built out just a standard Tableau dashboard, what you see here. And what I want to do during today's conversation is take you through these 5 tips that I have and actually go in and make revisions to this Tableau dashboard. So I think that's kind of the goal of today is how can I improve this dashboard with 5 or so tips. And I'm going to go through those tips right now. So the first tip I like to talk about is when taking a dashboard that you've either built or starting to think through a dashboard is this idea of progressive disclosure. If you haven't heard of this term, progressive disclosure is an interaction design principle with the idea of only displaying the most important content in one view. Less important or supporting content can be moved to a second page. The idea here is really not to detract a user from what's most important. So we hear progressive disclosure used a lot in UX design. And I guess the most common example of it that we see in our kind of day-to-day lives or week-to-week lives is when we purchase something online. We go through a checkout funnel, and if you've noticed, they've designed the checkout funnel to be in steps. So you fill in your email address and login first, or you fill in your first name and last name and personal information, and then you go to the next step and fill out your billing address, and then the next step to fill out your credit card information or your payment information. And the idea there is how do you chunk up those steps so it doesn't feel like it's too much in one view. Same type of principle applies directly to Tableau, is you don't want to put too much information on one view. I think the number that I've always heard is a person cannot concentrate on more than 7 or 8 data points at once. So the idea here is, even though you might have a lot of information in one view, like this one about all these wine statistics, here I think I have over 13 or 14 data points. It's really hard to concentrate on them all at once and understand what's most important. So even though all these stats here might be critical and important to have, I can deprioritize some of them to the next page. So the idea here with progressive disclosure is to think about, after you've created your dashboard or thinking about creating your dashboard, how do I limit to only 10 data points or less in one view? And if you don't want to stick to such a concrete number, think about just limiting to things that are only specific to a certain point. So here, as you can see, I'm removing the total wines by state. We have a lot of by state graphs on here, total wines by variety. I think that can be accomplished in another visual. Total number of regions isn't really applicable, or I can move that to a second page. So always think about what is most important and how to limit to just to focus your users' attention on what they need. The second tip I'd like to cover here is around best visualization, or the correct chart to use. So this might not really seem like a pro tip. This might seem like a beginner tip, but there's a little bit of detail built in here I'd like to discuss. So when you choose the best visualization, I would say that's arguably the most important task of the dashboard creator or the analyst, as that visual helps to represent the data. So if you choose the incorrect type of graph, that can lead to misinterpretation and bad business decisions. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to avoid here, is how to use dashboards to drive good business decisions. So I like to reference this chart here. This is very common all over the internet, of what type of visual is best for what type of data point, whether you're looking for comparative analytics, relationship types analytics, composition where it's either trended or static. I think this is a great starting point for trying to identify the correct type of visual to use. As a side note, I will say that bar charts or horizontal bar charts work in many scenarios, and I think it's actually a very good visualization. However, if you only choose horizontal bar charts in your dashboard, what that starts to lack is visual interest. And keeping a reader's attention is almost just as important as ensuring as they're looking at the correct visual. So think about reducing some repetition in your visualizations and start to bring in some interesting or different types of visualizations to help keep the content fresh. So let's go back to our US wine statistics dashboard over here. Now that I've removed some of these visuals or deprioritized them to the second page, I can start to try to understand if I've used the best visual for each one of these. So in the top left here, I'm looking at average points by state, average price by state. These are both good visualizations, kind of help us understand comparatively how do price and points differ by state. But I have a common dimension here of state. And I think this is a great opportunity to combine those graphs or create something that's a little bit more visually interesting. So what I've done is built a map graph. I think that's a great way to represent any geographical data point: longitude, latitude, state, country, region. Maps are a very quick way to get information at a glance. Now I can quickly see by just looking at this graph that average points by state, it looks like our West Coast, our Oregon, Washington, and California states have the highest number of average points, whereas more the Midwest or the Plains are lower in our total average points. I can see that very quickly without having to look at a graph or do any comparative piece. The next visual I want to take a look at is this highest rated wines here, wine varieties on the right. Interesting, it shows me my highest rated wine variety, but I seem to have one question that follows this right away, this idea of, okay, that might have the highest average points, but how does that relate to cost? Is cost and average points highly correlated? So is the Petite Syrah, is that always the one that's going to be the most expensive? So what I can do is combine two different metrics into one visual with one dimension by using a diverging horizontal bar graph. This is a visual that I really like to use. Good comparative analytics brings that context into it. So now I can see the most expensive or highest priced wine varieties, and how does that relate to total points. So I can see that the Merlot Malbec is the second in the highest price range bucket, but is lower on the average total points than some of the other ones. So I know that these two data points are not highly correlated together, but it gives us great context. And down here in the bottom right, where I've removed one of the visuals or deprioritized it, I have this space available. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I need to use that space up, but I think it's an opportunity to bring in a visual here around states and varieties, really understanding the distribution of them. So I've added in a packed bubble chart. I really think packed bubble charts are a great way to represent a lot of data points. So here what we're seeing is all of the blue bubbles represent the state of California, green represents Washington, I believe, purple is New York in this scenario, and each one of the bubbles specifically represents a variety type and the amount of total wines in that variety. So we know that California, Pinot Noirs, and Cab Sauves traditionally have the most number of wines. This is a really cool visual, especially when you're dealing with a lot of data points, and it's already starting to provide a lot of variety to this dashboard. As you can see, we've already taken this dashboard from a bunch of bar charts to now a map chart, a diverging bar chart, a packed bubble chart. It's starting to improve it, and you overall want to work with this dashboard rather than just a bunch of data points. Next design tip that I want to talk about is the idea of hierarchy. You hear this a lot in design principles, but hierarchy is the idea of arranging elements to order of importance. I'm sure many of you already create dashboards with great hierarchy already, but I want to go through some reasons of why it's important. By laying out these elements kind of logically and organizing them strategically, we can really influence how people read a dashboard. So typically we read a dashboard from top left to bottom right. We put the most important pieces at the top of the page and the less important pieces or the more detailed context at the bottom of the page. It's just traditionally how we should read a dashboard. So here we have our dashboard that we've been working through. And one thing, I don't know if everyone else has picked up on this, but in the bottom right-hand side, I have a bunch of these KPIs, these totals, total US wines, total number of vineyards, varieties, etc. It's kind of just over here in the bottom right, and it's almost hard to see. And if you haven't noticed them already, it's because they're in the bottom right. You've probably been looking from the top left to the bottom right without knowing it. The next one is this wine varieties by province. I think this packed bubble chart looks really great here. I like it, but it's kind of deprioritized in the bottom right area. I would love to either make it bigger or bring it up to the top to show more detail around these bubbles. And then lastly, this variety by price and rating. So this is right up at top of my dashboard. It's prioritized really high. It's probably got a little too much detail to be right at the top of a visualization, the top of a dashboard. So I can probably take this detail, deprioritize it a little bit lower on the page, or make it take up a little bit less real estate. So let's go ahead and make those changes here and take a quick look. As you can see in the top, we've now relocated the KPIs, brought those right up to the beginning, and that's what you see right off the bat when you log in and look at this dashboard. I know the total number of wines, varieties. When I click on any of these pieces, I have action filters set up to limit the data on that point, and all my KPI bars will adjust correctly. In addition, I've enlarged the packed bubble chart, and what this does, it now shows much more detail. The cool thing too, when I did this, it actually looks like a bunch of wine grapes on a vine. So I thought that was perfect with our wine theme here. And now it gives a lot more detail, and you can really see the relative size difference between some of these bubbles. And it also just makes it really evident to see, how much wine actually is produced from California. And then lastly, I reduced the overall size of the variety by price and rating. It still shows really well down in that spot down there, but instead of taking up so much room, it's more of kind of a detail information. So now I've kind of rearranged some of these data points in terms of what's most important. My KPI bars go to the top. I've enlarged my most impactful visual, and I've reduced the size of a visual that seems like it's more on the detail side. Still all in good position and easy to see, but just by making a small amount of tweaks here, you can see I've already improved the overall look and feel of this dashboard. Next tip, tip number 4, I'd like to talk through is around color theory. Color is probably one of the most important aspects of a dashboard behind using the correct visualization. Color can help us distinguish the difference between metrics and dimensions, or it can be used to just support the design aesthetics. So think about color more than just red traditionally bad, good traditionally, or green traditionally good, but how do we decide which colors to use for my standard bar charts? So in that visualization that I was showing there, I was using all blues. How did I decide that? Well, it was probably just the default color from the color palette I was using in Tableau. Furthermore, how do I choose a complementary color? So the idea here, and one resource I would highly suggest for if you struggle understanding or figuring out colors to use on your dashboard, is use the color wheel. This is a really great resource. It can teach you important design considerations, such as what colors are complementary, which colors are analogous, etc. And it can help you to start to build out your color palette. So for example, let's say we're building a dashboard where I was primarily using blue colors. Then the complementary color to blue is orange, and the complementary color to purple is yellow. Use those colors in conjunction with each other on a dashboard if you have to use multiple different colors. Don't think about, I need to use every color on the color wheel, because I've seen that issue before, but think about complementary colors and limiting your color palette. Another great way to think about designing your dashboard, and Tableau makes this easy with their tinted color palettes, is this idea of analogous colors. So those are 3 colors in a row on the color wheel. So if you're designing a dashboard, pick 3 colors in a row on the color wheel, and that can often really help to keep the look and feel of your dashboard very clean. If you need to use different tints or different shades of an analogous color wheel palette, that can definitely be done by just reducing or increasing the opacity of that specific color. Color is something that takes a while to learn, but I think some simple principles to remember are use complementary colors on a dashboard by using the color wheel and what's directly across from each other on the wheel. Use analogous colors to pick 3 in a row to make your dashboard all kind of flow in that same look and feel, and use tints of colors if you need to reduce the opacity or increase one. Tableau does make this easy with their color palette choice, but this is something to keep in mind for all different dashboards. So let's take a look at our dashboard. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but as I was working through this, I realized that one thing was really bugging me, and it was all the blue. We're dealing with a subject here specifically where blue just really isn't part of the color palette. Wines, we're talking about reds and greens and purples and earthy tones and things that feel more wine-like, rather than blue is just not a color that we quickly associate. So one thing that I wanted to do to enhance the overall aesthetics of this dashboard is to change out the color palette into more of a purple tone dashboard. I can easily do that within Tableau by just clicking on the sheet, adjusting the color palette, and selecting the same color palette across each one. I've also adjusted some of the colors on my pack bubble chart to be more of that kind of vine, earthy wine tones of greens, browns, and purples as well. So now this dashboard feels more like a wine dashboard by just making a major color change on the overall piece of it. As you can see, I'm also bringing in shades of colors as well to represent different aspects of these charts. So the darker purple spots represent more or heavier density of data. The lighter ones represent less density of data as well. So that's that idea of kind of using color. But color doesn't always just have to be an overall aesthetic design appeal. It can also be specific to a type of visual. So one visual we haven't talked about much is the price by points over here in the bottom left. What this represents is each one of those circle points represent one wine, one bottle of a specific wine. And it shows where all the US wines rate in terms of average price versus average points. It's a little hard to kind of tell the difference since there's so many wines and they're all grouped together. What is the difference between these, and how would I even think about these in different groups or clusters? And that's when we can use the cluster action within Tableau to help us improve that. Very simple, just drag it onto my stack or onto my scatter plot. And what that allows us to do is build out these different buckets or groups. So I've used the same color palette that I was using with the pack bubble chart and just applied them to this scatter point or scatter plot. And what this does, it now shows, all right, now I see the differentiation in these groups and which groups are most likely and which wines are most similar and different to each other. It's pretty easy as it kind of goes by average wine points. But now I just know that all the ones in the dark purple are most similar to each other and where those kind of thresholds or breakpoints exist. So now I'm adding color not only from an overall aesthetic standpoint, but also adding it as a way to do better analysis. And the last tip I want to go through is around imagery. So imagery can sometimes feel like a bonus or an extra thing, but really I think it can round out a dashboard and can help kind of create a better memory with the dashboard. So it's a visual clue. It can help you understand a subject content better than if you were just looking at a graph or just text. So there's a couple different ways that we can include imagery in our dashboards. One way that I'm not going to show you that I'm not a huge fan of is using a background image. If you use a background image within a dashboard, and I've seen this done very well, I would encourage you to choose one that is a darker tone or a lighter tone, and then change the opacity on it to very, very low. Sometimes that can really distract from the overall presentation. I have used background images before on dashboards. I was specifically working with a tech company, and they were doing a marketing campaign, and we wanted to use one of the main images from the marketing campaign on the dashboard since it was going to be all about that campaign. And it actually worked out quite well just because the image was very, very dark, and I changed the opacity very low, and it worked in the back. But in general, what that can do is just kind of distract your viewers from the actual final output. But anyways, back to the dashboard. If you've been looking at this the whole time, one thing you might have said is, I feel like we're missing something, and that is maybe in the top right. Maybe a nice visual or image or logo up here in the top right would help to balance this overall dashboard. I feel like I'm leaving a lot of space up there in the top right. So I've taken the logo that we're using, in this case, Virginia Vineyards, and placed it up in the top right. And what that does, it gives us a nice little balance of this whole dashboard. Now putting a logo in the top right, title of the dashboard in the top left, our KPI bar, and flow through the entire piece. I like to use those types of visuals as they just help to clearly identify the company, the brand, the team that I'm working with, and can create that nice balance of the visual element. Next thing I'd like to point out, and this is more of a kind of an advanced tip, some people might know how to do this, some people might not, is this idea of dynamic image insertion. So if I'm on a Tableau dashboard, and here I've got an arrow pointing down to those specific bottles of wine there in the scatter plot, I can actually use Tableau to insert an image of that specific wine bottle if I either point to a URL of that wine bottle or upload an image of it. There's lots of creative ways to go about the solution, but the best way that I found is to actually create a card, excuse me, a sheet, and include it as a background image on that particular card, and then have it filter to a specific data point. So I don't want to spend too much time on that piece, but that's how this is done: is create a sheet, create a background image, upload it, and then have it only filter when a specific asset or specific data point is selected. So what I want to do here is, when I click on one of these specific data points, I want an image of that bottle of wine to show. So what I've gone ahead and done is added a bunch of images from online into this Tableau workbook. And so when I click on that image or click on that scatter point, an image is going to show. So I'll click on this one that I'm highlighting right here. And as with the entire dashboard, of course, I have action filter set up, so everything filters. So I'm looking at one bottle of wine, this Cardinale. It's from California. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon. It has 100 points, and it's an average price point of $200. I can click on another one of these data points, and now I'm looking at the Intrepid by Law, also another California wine, a Syrah, and this one is very expensive. It's $750 and only about 92 points. Again, I can click on another data point, and I'm looking at another Syrah from Oregon and looking at the total points information by that. So as you can see, by just adding in some visual cues here, I have a better memory of those specific wines that I looked at. Like, what was that most expensive one in the top left? Oh yeah, that was the Intrepid by Law. Or what was the cheaply priced, or the decently priced, I call it, bottle of wine of this Bionic Frog, and where was that from? It's just easy to create. So one way that I've seen this done creatively as well is, we're working with a commercial real estate company, and they wanted an image of the actual property to show up. We uploaded all the pictures of the properties in the listing. I think there were like 80 or so. And so whenever they went to that specific dashboard, that image would show up. It just creates a better memory, a better ability or want to work with that dashboard. Image insertion can be important in a variety of ways. So as a quick recap, these were some of the tips that I talked about. Progressive disclosure, only showing what's most important, deprioritizing some visuals to a second page. This is not a resume. Don't feel the need to try to include everything on one page. It's okay to have secondary information on a secondary page. Executives, team leaders, companies would much rather see only a few visuals than a ton. Use the correct visualization. If you're only going to use a certain amount of visualizations, you want to make sure that you only use the right one, or you use one that is a collection of a couple different data points. That's why we built out that diverging bar graph, or used the state or the US map to show the different wine prices and wine points. Hierarchy, always remember to include the most important piece of data at the top, or KPIs at the top, or single images, or single numbers, because that can make a person want to look just at the top. You read top left to bottom right. So consider always putting the most important information at the top, the detailed information at the bottom. Color theory. Remember, think about the color wheel. Next time you're designing a dashboard, think about complementary colors, the ones that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. Or if you're designing within a palette of colors, choose 3 colors that are analogous or all next to each other on the color wheel. That is a really great resource, and I promise you that will help to understand color better and apply it better. Imagery, using icons can help to differentiate sections, as well as including logos or including a dynamic image insertion through Tableau. That can really create like a stickiness effect to your dashboard. I think these 5 tips can take any dashboard from a very standard bar chart looking dashboard that has great information, and with the same exact data points, turning it into a dashboard that makes you want to interact with it, makes you want to play around with it, click on the different wine types, and really understand your data in a very quick and fast manner. And I believe this helps to accomplish all of the goals of why we put so much importance on visual design. So those were kind of the 5 tips I wanted to go through today. Didn't want to spend too long on each one, but I'd love to answer any questions or help dive into any of these topics in a little bit more detail. So I will go to the Q&A section here and take a look at some of the questions that have come in. All right, first question here. How do you balance the color wheel usage and accounting for colorblind users? Do you use a colorblind template? Yes, so I think that's a great question, and one that we get asked a lot is yes, to just use a colorblind template or a color appropriate template if that's how you need to design for your users. I would say, so Tableau has some of those palettes already pre-built in, and you can use those directly. I think that's a great question and something that you always need to consider for your audience. One thing to keep in mind specifically when using line graphs, so line graphs show the least amount of color, make sure that you have good differentiation in your color type there when using line graphs. If they're too similar, they can run together. That's a great question. Let's see, another question that came in. What place on the dashboard is the best to add filters like date filters, top row or left column? Another good question. So we go through this a lot. So I've seen on Tableau dashboards in particular, a lot of left column filters. I honestly prefer filters on the top row. I think that has a nice top down kind of feel rather than working left to right, top to down. So if the idea is as your user goes to a dashboard to filter, they'll filter first and then they'll see the results of the filter rather than filtering left to right. I think either of those work, but the way that I've seen them work best is with filters on the top row, because it's essentially what you want your users to action on first. It's a good question. Another question that came through, what about visualizations which can lead to other visualizations like drill through or drill path? Are they good? Absolutely. I think drill path and drill visualizations are a great way to have your data be more interactive. You just have to kind of state ahead of time whether your dashboard has that type of interactivity that you want somebody to play around with. Drill dashboards typically are the second level for a drill dashboard is usually for a bar chart. I think a bar chart works really well as a second level because you've started to narrow down your dimensions or narrow down your metrics specifically. If you use them, keep a couple things in mind. One, keep the color palette in mind, make sure not to switch that. 2, make sure to only limit to the specific types of drill paths that will help to answer the question. So I've seen some people try to bury lots of visualizations in drill paths and only include 5. Sometimes that can be good, but then you're starting to get down this idea of maybe I'm including too much information in one view. Maybe this many drill paths isn't that helpful. So what I would consider is if you add drill paths or add a click through or drill down into your cards is usually only do 1 to 2 layers deep. After that, I think it can become distracting and you can kind of forget where you came from initially. I would rather see that those visuals are deprioritized to a second page, kind of a supporting facts or supporting answers. And I would include that on a second page instead of just having too many drill throughs. But that's a good question. So those were some of the main questions that came in. Let's see, we've got one more here. Tooltips. Yes, so tooltips are a great way to make your dashboard a little bit easier to interpret if needed. So I would say that I like to use tooltips when we're dealing with either complicated metrics or complicated data sources. Ones where you kind of have to explain to the user what they're looking at or how this was calculated. In this example that we're showing today, around wine varieties, I would say that that's pretty simple to figure out what we're looking at, not much interpretation that needs to be done. But if you have data points where that it's might want to add some description around how it was calculated, or when it was pulled, or where it was pulled from, or how to use this, that would be the best way to use tooltips. So the thing I like to use with tooltips is, if it's a metric calculation, include how it was calculated. And it's also important to use a little bit of business context for what question does this answer. So if you're sending your report to somebody who isn't day-to-day in the data, you might want to show a question of what is the business question or context of why this visual was created in the first place. So business question, how it was calculated, is a really great idea for tooltips. Here's a question. So one bit of information I saw that was missing is a legend for the different colors in the bubble chart visualization. I wasn't clear on the colors represented, which could lead to potential misinterpretation. Yeah, that's a great point, Stuart. So including a legend is really helpful. So in this particular instance, the reason I didn't include a legend is because we're dealing with 26 different colors, and that would have been a 26 different color legend. So the action that I was looking for the user to do is actually hover over. And once you hover over a few, then you can start to understand that, okay, the purple bubbles, those are all California, the green bubbles, that represents Washington, so on and so forth. I think it's a great idea to include a legend, but sometimes when your legend is over a certain number of values, it probably doesn't make sense just for the sake of the dashboard to include on there. So if I were to send this out to a user, I might include a tooltip on how to navigate that bubble chart, or I might include a little bit of information of how to just navigate and use that particular visual. But in general, yeah, legends are great. Any type of misinterpretation would be incorrect. I think the one thing that I saw too, Stuart, I'll agree with you, is if you remember on the dashboard, and I'll click back to it just to show, that I didn't like after I built it, but I was really far into this already, is this idea of, now I have the same colors used in the average points, price by points bubble or stack bubble chart versus the wine varieties by province. So the one in the bottom left and the one on the right. Somebody could say, do those greens correlate with each other? And in this case, they don't. So I think that's potentially a little confusing, because you want some consistent use of colors across your dashboard. But to be very honest, I was trying to make a point and illustrate that we can use colors not only just on the overall design aesthetics, but also to help differentiate parts of a scatter plot. So that was one thing that I thought was maybe a my bad on here, but I think that's just important. Okay, so no, great question, Stuart, and I appreciate you bringing up that topic. Question here. So how do you show important insights in explanatory dashboards as opposed to exploratory dashboards? Great question. So insights or text insights, or so if you've produced a dashboard and you're sending them out with some type of insights tied to them, what I prefer to do is include that as a text box at the top. Insights should always be the first thing that somebody reads. And the reason there is because it can provide context for what they look at within the charts or the visual. So including a little bit of a text box up at the top with a few sentences or a couple bullet points on what the person's about to read, or why this is important, or why the dashboard's filtered this certain way, I think that that's a great place to put it. So in this visual here, or in this dashboard that we're looking at, I would probably make a little bit more room at the top, maybe move the wine statistics to a centered or the right side, and then include a text box up there that just said important insights or key learnings, and then keep it to just a few bullet points. Anything more than that, I don't think people would want to read, but it's good to have that context prior to going into the specific dashboard. Good question, Eric. Okay, another question. Do you think instead of a cluster chart on the shared dashboard, we could have used any other visualization because it looked very cluttered and colors were mixing at a few points, or else we could have increased the size of the chart? Yeah, so that was another really good point, is the cluster visualization on the bottom left here, that is extremely crunched, especially for that. Some might say that you could actually replace the wine varieties by province and the price points by province cluster chart, and make that a little bit bigger. And I've actually done that. I've had that in a similar way where I like to put a cluster chart with a lot of a lot of points over on the right-hand side and keep it big, how I have this kind of laid out right now. For this one, I wanted to really highlight the wine varieties by province piece, and I wanted to show some differentiation on the dashboard. So there's a lot of options I could have taken here, but I think for this particular one and what was most important is to really understand where am I getting the most wine production by state, and then what are those types of wine varieties that are shown there. It's less important for this specific dashboard to talk about the average price and points and look at this particular one. I wanted to know a little bit more about the overall US statistics and understanding them. But I think that's a good point. And as you can see here, building dashboards and doing this is a blend of art and science. There is an artistic standpoint here, and putting the average points by price over in the far right section would make it larger and more prominent. And if that were the main part of this dashboard, I would definitely include it there, and maybe deprioritize the wine varieties by province. But that's a way to play around with it. And I think so if I were to deploy this dashboard in a professional setting and actually send this out to users, that's the type of feedback I would start to gather is, hey, it's looking at this price by average points is a really helpful visual. Can we make this larger, or can we help show some more detail around this versus wine varieties by province that might not be as helpful? I can deprioritize that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can move things in and out, but I think that that's a great way to at least start your feedback process, is start to include things in the way that you think would be good to view them, send them out for feedback in the way that's being used, kind of that user feedback, and then see if you have any feedback on it. Let's see, we've got another question here. So shouldn't you also include the source of your wine statistics, since people might dispute the validity or authority of it? Great point, Eric. So I think in the bottom right, a little text could have been put down in the bottom to say where exactly this data was retrieved from, the freshness of this data, etc. That's a great point. I think today's focus was a little less around like all the pieces that should be included in a dashboard, and more around some of the design principles that you should consider as you're building a dashboard. But that's a great point, Eric, is we always want to include that information about either how the data was collected, where it was collected, how it was calculated. That could be in the tooltip like we were talking about earlier, or it could be just this footnote that we have right here. But yeah, Eric, great point. In the bottom right, I would have included data source, colon, and then a link to the data source with the date. So yeah, so I think that's all of the questions. If there's any more, I'd be happy to take them. Hopefully this was helpful as we go through this. Think about this. If you go back to your desk, or you're building another dashboard, or you want to analyze another dashboard that you've already created, just think and consider some of the design principles that I propose. I think they can help you at least evaluate your dashboard and think about ways that you could improve it, whether it's just by using a better color palette choice, by using a better visual, getting away from such a grid layout view, making sure you prioritize the right data at the top of the page or the bottom. Simple things like that, I think, could really help improve your overall dashboard, your Tableau dashboard specifically. Great, so that's, it doesn't look like there's any additional questions. I really thank everybody for coming to this. I had a great time playing with this data and putting this together. I enjoy sharing some of the knowledge that I've gained over the years, and really appreciate everyone's attention in coming into this. If you have any additional questions, let's connect on the Measure Slack channel or the SDEC Slack channel, and we can dive in further from there. So thanks again. I'll stop the recording, and everybody have a great day. Talk to you all soon.